All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the latest Apache TinkerPop contributor cast. Today we're going to be talking about the recent releases of 358, 366, and 371. Joining me today, we've got Ken, Valentin, Yang, and for the first time, we've got Ryan. Ryan's been a recent contributor that's joined the community in the last couple of months. So thanks everyone for joining and participating. Just a bit of an overview of what we'll talk about today is first we're going to go over some fixes and updates that have gone into all three of these new releases, and at the end we're going to talk about some of the new features that are exclusively in 371. So to get started, we'll talk about 358 a bit here. This release mostly just minor bug fixes and minor improvements, and this is likely the last release in the 3.5 line. As of right now, the development branch is closed still for 3.5. So if you're still on TinkerPop 3.5, it's a good time to start thinking about upgrading to 3.6 or 3.7. Of course, there's always a possibility for further work to go into 3.5, another release to happen, but that discussion will have to take place based on any circumstances that become available later. For 3.6, once again, this has also mostly been a maintenance release, but there are a couple of bigger changes that we thought were worth noting here. So first of all, we have some changes to the project step. The project step now throws an exception if you provide duplicate keys in it. So this is because it's producing a map. It's sort of nonsensical to have duplicate keys in a map. You can only have one item per key. So that would lead to some weird behavior if anyone accidentally put duplicate keys. So an exception has been added to this case. This was contributed by Norio Akagi. Additionally, there's now a new translator that's been added to Gremlin Go. This was contributed by Ite Wolfish. This was their first contribution to TinkerPop as well, so that's greatly appreciated. What the translators do is they let you translate from the native bytecode traversal in the GLV into a Gremlin Groovy script string. So if you need the string form of Gremlin, you can use the translators for this. This is something that's available in all the other GLVs, but was previously missing in Go. So we've got that extra parity brought in now. And the same theme of adding parity to Go, there's some changes to the within and without predicates. And Valentin, I believe you worked on this, so do you want to shed some light?
Yes, it's a small improvement related to handling arguments for p within and p without in Go language. It just to make Go similar to other GLVs.
Thanks. And then we've got some changes to request IDs. Ken, I believe that was your contribution.
Yeah, so for a little more background, responses from the server generally contain the request ID as part of the response message. So in order to form that response, the request ID should be a valid UUID because that's what the server is expecting. And the GLVs, on the other hand, expect for the request IDs to be in the response. So the problem here is when you send an invalid request ID to the server, the GLV doesn't really know how to handle the error response from the server. So we've added client-side checking for both the Python and JavaScript drivers to prevent this from happening.
All right, thanks. And Ryan, you worked on some changes to the user agent as well.
Yeah, so the Gremlin server is now able to handle user agents sent over HTTP headers. This is a feature present with WebSocket connections, but was previously missing from HTTP. But now the user agent that comes with HTTP headers can now be handled and displayed as part of these server metrics.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Now I want to move on a bit to some of the 371 changes here. So it's going to start with some of the smaller changes and going to save for the end of the big stuff, which is all these new string list and date manipulation steps. So to start, we've done a few changes to some of the Gherkin feature test tags for providers. So if you're a provider, you're already quite familiar with these tags. They define different features that are needed for different graph tests. So if your graph doesn't support every feature, you skip the tests that are specifically for that feature. So previously we've had a multi-meta properties tag, which states that a test requires either multi-properties or meta-properties. This has now been split into 2 separate tags, one for multi-properties and one for meta-properties. This just allows you to get a little bit more fine-grained control over which tests you're using for your graph, as many graphs support multi-properties but not meta-properties, or vice versa. So that's one improvement. And we've also added a new insertion ordering required tag. So I've heard this from several providers where their graph doesn't necessarily guarantee any ordering in terms of if you call it g.v, there's no guarantee on what order the vertices come back in. Same with edges and properties. But TinkerGraph, which is where most of these tests are run throughout development, does have that ordering guarantee. So there's been a few cases where tests have required ordering and been sent up to providers that don't support that, and that's been a bit of an issue. Providers have had to manually figure out which tests they need to skip. We've gone through and corrected as many tests as we could, but the few tests that have remained that require this ordering now have this tag. So if your graph does not support such ordering, just use this tag to skip all those tests. Now pass it off here to Yang, talk a bit about some of the changes to Concat.
Okay, thank you, Ko. So yeah, so thanks for everyone who tried our new Concat features in 3.7.0. We've got great feedbacks. And then so one of the major feedback we had was just the fact that the 3.7.0 Concat, there's an imbalance between Concat able to take string bar args versus traversal. So in 3.7.1, where Concat can only take one traversal argument. So that means if you wanted to concatenate multiple traversals, you need to just chain the concat step. Now, we've added a convenience in 3.7.1 where concat can take multiple traversal as the argument. So kind of in the example in 3.7.0, you have to chain concats, whereas in 3.7.1, now you can use concat and then input multiple traversals inside to achieve the same thing. And actually, this leads slightly into another step that we introduced that offers flexibility, but I will leave that a bit later to Valentin. So back on the concat step. So in addition to the update I was talking about with regarding to accepting traversal bar args, there are some corrections we had to make to concat step as we realized. So one change that would be breaking in the sense that if you have to expect different behavior in between 3.7.0 and 3.7.1 is that for concat, when it will no longer special treat the inject in its argument, it will just use basically the underlying implementation will just treat inject as any other parent step does to inject. So basically, if you want to inject a argument into, if you want to put a constant a traversal that will insert a constant inside of concat, just use the constant step. That would be the recommended way and that would work for both versions. And then in addition, we realized that the type parameter for concat in .NET was actually unneeded. So that would be a breaking change, but it should make concat traversals easier to write now. You don't have to add the object part of it. So yeah, and with that, we can lead into all these new features, which should be the meat of our presentation today. So with 3.7.1, we're introducing a lot of new steps. So these include all the string list state manipulation. I think they total up over 20 steps. So yeah, so we expect everyone to just try them locally. Try them with server or try them and see how they work for you. And then we welcome any and all feedbacks on these steps, and especially if you identify bugs with them. But yeah, so a little bit more on the motivation for new steps. So the big one was to remove the need for closures. So certain operations, especially involving list or set, it can be very complex to do with closures. And another part of using closure is that this leaves a gap in traversal functionalities for providers that does not allow closures, either for performance or security reasons. So now, by introducing these traversal functionalities, they can use these as, in their regular traversal. So in addition, yeah.
And actually, if I could just add a little bit to that point as well, historically, Gremlin's been very good at manipulating graph objects and working with graph structure, but it has not provided much for non-graph structure at all. So if you were trying to do a lot of this operation before, have to do a lot of post-processing on your results, perhaps. So bringing these capabilities into Gremlin itself, to me, is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. That's a point well made. So I'll just dive into the new string manipulation steps. So these are the 11 basic ones we introduced. They are they're rather similar to all the string manipulation steps used in other database and programming languages. So these will take incoming string traversers and just perform the desired manipulation on them. For example, just listed here, I put full just so that everything can be displayed nicely on a list. But basically, you can use to-upper manipulation to capitalize everything coming in, or we have the substring function where it's basically the any substring function where you take either the index, the start index as inclusive, and then add optionally an end index. And we're also allowing negative indices. So basically, if it's negative start index, you're going to start at the end of string. And then if the end index is negative, it will also count from the end of the string, so on. Yeah, so please check all the docs for these string functions and then give them a try and let us know how you like them. And let's just, so a little bit of into the semantics. There's a couple of, so, leading into these steps, I think if you were following the dev list, there were some back and forth discussions, as well as I guess the discussion that thanks to Dave, who started all the proposal for all of these. And then there were some discussions regarding the semantics. And then once all the semantics are, right now, this is what we have decided. And these are some of the major parts that here. So for example, the first one is that null values from all the incoming traversers, they are not processed. So they will remain null when returned. So we're not, if you get a null and then you want to say to-upper it, we're not going to turn that into a null string or anything. So we thought that was the right decision to make. And then also we also introduced scope in these string functions. So what scope does is that the default scope will be global. So when you specify local, so in addition to being able to take string traversers, you can take an incoming list traversers. That's a list of strings. So it will simplify operations where if you know your traversal will result in a list of string, and then you want to do a certain operation instead of the list, and then you can just use local for that. So that provides an added layer of convenience. And so with that, there are some exceptions and errors that will come out to let you know that. So with the default scope, we have, it will throw an illegal exception argument if the incoming traverser is not a string. So it will also throw an exception for the local scope if anything that is not a list of string. And then also just note that the string step is the step that will not throw an exception, because its function is to take anything that's not a string and turn it into the string manipulation of it. And then with that, I will turn to Valentin to explain the more flexible step.
Thank you, Yen. The main purpose of adding format step is to be able to merge data from different sources into string. Currently supported data from element properties, maps, scope variables, also mix of properties. At first example, you can see how to use property elements. Second example shows usage of scope variables to get data from different sources. And last one, combination of element property and positional argument. Positional argument is just a result of any traversal. It's very convenient in some cases. And next slide. Also, we added some date manipulation step. As date designed to convert input data into date. If input is number, then it's considered as Unix epoch time. If input is string, it's parsed as ISO 9601 formatted string. Date add step can add some value to incoming date. For example, you need to add several days or minutes or hours and other. Date diff is a simple difference between two incoming dates. Also, we extended datetime function, which can be used only in string gremlins to get current server time. It's this function executed only on server. And I would like to hand over to Ken.
Thanks, Malton. So I'll be talking about the newly added list function steps. So we call these the list function steps, but we really mean that they take in an iterable object as a traverser. So I may still refer to them as list functions, but just realize that what I mean is that for most of these steps, they take an iterable object. So that's going to be like an array, a list, or a set. But you should check the documentation for each of these steps because they're actually different. So one of the things about these list functions is that they're sort of a new paradigm for steps in TinkerPop. And what I mean by that is they're local by default. And local by default is that the expected traverser is a iterable type and not a single value. So this is a bit different from the other steps because normally this sort of behavior would be delegated to a scope local version of the step. But there's no such thing for these steps. There's no global version of these steps right now. And another thing to recognize for the filtering steps, the two filtering steps, which is all and any, is that null and non-iterable traversers are going to get filtered out. So you can contrast this with all the other list function steps, which are mapping steps, in that nulls and non-iterables for either the traverser or the argument in those cases will throw exceptions. So if we move to the next slide, so here we're going to be talking about the filtering steps all and any. So you should use all and any to sort of determine if the elements inside the sort of iterable of the traverser matches the provided predicate, the predicate from the argument. So this allows you to easily filter out list traversers that sort of without having to do like that sort of map, unfold, fold sort of thing that you would have had to do before. So it kind of simplifies the gremlin that you need to write. One thing you should note about these two steps is that they're ternary aware. So what I mean by this is that it follows the comparability semantics from the Gremlin semantics documentation. So you should check that portion of the provider docs for more information about that. An example of what this means is that null is going to be equal to null. So if you have like null in a list and null in another list, they will be considered as equal. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So here we'll be talking about the set operations: merge, intersect, difference, and disjunct. You can, if you think about these as sort of the mathematical set operations, you can consider the traverser as A and the argument as B. This is going to be particularly important for the difference step because the order there matters. So the traverser is A and the argument is going to be B. Like if you take a look at that example with near the bottom there. And so once again, it's expected that both the argument and the traversals, the argument and the incoming traverser isn't iterable. One other sort of wrinkle here is that the argument can be a traversal that produces a traverser. That is an iterable, if that makes any sense at all. So just quickly going through the examples here. So that top line there is just showing what would be in this data set if you were to fold the values of age. And then what would happen if you did like the mathematical intersect, disjunct, and difference operations on those. Those should be fairly self-explanatory. The last one there, though, merge. If you take a look at it, you'll realize that merge is probably, it's actually the set union operation. And so the union step already exists in Gremlin, and we decided not to rename that, which is why we've called this merge. But another reason we've called this merge is that merge has a bit of a unique characteristic in that it allows you to merge maps. So if you have two maps, you can now merge them using this new merge step, which is going to greatly simplify what you had to do before to merge maps. And moving on to, so here we'll be talking about the remaining steps, which are product, combine, reverse, and conjoin. So product is fairly simple. It's just used to get the Cartesian product of two lists, and then it gets outputted as a list of lists, sort of like how that is in that example there. Combine is similar to merge, and remember, merge is union, set union, except that it allows duplicates. You can think of it as sort of like sets versus lists. So combine is essentially a list concatenation operation. Reverse is another bit of a special case in that it can reverse any traverser. So this is one of the exceptions where it doesn't have to be an iterable. But it's mostly designed to reverse either strings or iterables. And the last one here is conjoin. And this is a joining operation. What's going to happen is it's going to take the all the elements within the iterable. It's going to turn them to strings. And then it's going to join those together with the delimiter you provide in the argument. So the return is going to be that full string. So an interesting use case for these new sort of list function steps is that is when you sort of use them in together with paths. So path can be treated almost like a list. So if you consider something like g.v.out knows path by age dot reverse, that means you'll get the path back, but in a reverse order. This is one of those sort of interesting things that you can do with these list functions with paths. something to consider when you're thinking about how to use these new functions. And now I'll hand it off to Ryan.
Thanks, Ken. So something else we've been working on as well is creating sample applications for all the GLVs. So now each GLV will have a folder containing examples for connecting to remote servers, as well as basic Gremlin queries and some traversals. And hopefully this will make it easier for new users to get started with using TinkerPop. And back to Cole.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Some other things that are in the works here. After the 3.7 line is complete here, we're switching our versioning scheme to a more traditional semantic versioning model. So the next major release of TinkerPop now will be TinkerPop 4.0. And from there, every major update will be TinkerPop 5, TinkerPop 6, and so on. So we're dropping the current concept of epochs, which don't change too often, maybe every 10 years or so. With this, we're still going to have our minor releases with kind of small bug fixes and non-breaking improvements. And the door's also now open for micro patch releases, which may only fix like one bug in one client or something such as that. So that's going to be just a new model going forward. And then there's also more to come. So there's a lot that's still under consideration for the next releases, but very little has been finalized as of right now. So keep an eye on the dev list and the proposals section of the repo, as there's lots of new features that are under consideration and under development. More will be shared on those in the future. So that sort of wraps up what we want to talk about today. As always, if you want to get a full list of the changes, you can take a look at the changelog and take a look at the upgrade docs as well. There's lots of really great examples for all these new steps in the upgrade docs. As always, many thanks to all the contributors for the awesome work they've done. One piece I want to highlight here is with all these new steps coming in, we held several TinkerPop gatherings in Discord. So these were essentially bug bash sessions where anyone could join and just try out the new steps as they're in the works and give some feedback as to how they behave. So thank you to everybody that participated in those. Expect we'll be holding them again with as future releases near. So if you're interested in participating, just keep an eye out on the events channel in Discord. And I think that concludes the presentation. So if there's any questions, we can stick around a few minutes to answer them.
Okay, no questions.
And any other points I missed that you guys want to cover as well? So we wait here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also just like to extend my thanks to everybody in the Discord community who came out and joined those TinkerPop gathering sessions. I mean, I think it was really helpful in shaping how we did the steps, because it was like a really good way to sort of beta the sort of semantics and see if people thought it was, oh, was this a natural way for us to handle this in TinkerPop or not, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely agreed. I think it's easy to, when you're implementing the step, to get wrapped up in just like, okay, I'm going to get the step working this way. And then should it actually be working that way? No, I think we need all the users and providers and, folks out there to test drive those. And you may still find that things still don't feel gremlin or feel natural. So just feel free to drop them into Discord or put them in Jira's, send them on dev lists even. So yeah, we'll be tuning into those. And so just a little point on the semantic versioning part. Yeah, so I think we want to move forward with that. There had been a discussion on dev list about it. So it should allow us to have a more clear defined view of what changes goes into what version, and that it would, spare providers and users as well, like of trying to figure out, oh, what version of driver am I going to use here? Like, is it going to break? We want to just have make sure that, you know, if you're using Gremlin 4, things within Gremlin 4 shouldn't break on you. So so with that said, like yeah, you know, like any potential breaking changes, we do want to enforce pushing that to like major releases, or like any new things that won't be backwards compatible. But yeah, it would take, you know, community effort as well to keep that, get a good standard out there too. So yeah, you know, thanks for all the support.
Are you saying that if we find any problems with the current steps we just talked about in this presentation, they won't be fixed until 4.0?
I don't know. We'll have to see case by case, you know. Yeah. If it's, you know, yeah, we really have to assess it. Yeah. Kind of like how, you know, if we circle back to the closing of the 3.5 branch, you know, it's closed. We don't want to do any we don't want to do any feature, obviously any feature. And then even bug fixes, we do want to start targeting 3.6, and then only major ones we would like to do case by cases. So
one more thing, if there's no questions, Yang.
Mhm.
If people don't have a Jira account and they want to make an issue, how should they go about doing this?
Oh yes, that's a good question. Yeah, so just use the self-serve Jira account creation. We do monitor the requests really fairly often, so it should be within a day that you get the approval for creating the Jira request. And if somehow it didn't go through or it got missed, feel free to shout out in Discord, users, Gremlin, dev list, any other ways you can find. But yeah, there's a potential problem that we've actually recently encountered, is that unfortunately it's not flexible enough to detect that you have a duplicated user ID to an existing one. So in that case, we'll have to reject the request. You have to submit one with a new proposed user ID so we can approve the process. So that is unfortunately a caveat. But yeah. Yeah, or the quickest way you can also just reach us is actually Discord, and then if it's urgent, we can help create a Jira ticket while the process is going on with the account creation.
All right, so doesn't look like there's any questions coming in, so I think we'll wrap it up here. So I just wanted to say once again, thank you everyone for joining us here. Thanks for taking part. Hope to see everybody around on Discord. Hopefully you guys can all join the next gatherings whenever they take place. So thanks so much everyone, and I'll see you again later.